بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Alhamdulillah, we have a special program tonight here. This is a collaboration between IMAAM and Fawaki. Fawaki is an organization that specializes in Arabic training, classical Arabic training, and it's been around for how many years now, Brandon? 8 years. 8 years? Oh, very nice. So I've been wanting to study Arabic for a while, but then when they opened in London, I didn't have any excuse not to join. So I have been with Fawaki for 3 years, maybe. So alhamdulillah, it's been a process, but it's good for me. I get to understand more about the Quran. So without further ado, maybe Sheikh want to say a few minutes. So I'll introduce Brother Saif Omar. He's the director of Fawaki, and he will be introducing Salim. And welcome to IMAAM Center.
Thank you, mashallah. We've heard a lot about the center here, the IMAAM Center from Brother Oscar, and we were very excited when the President of Indonesia came to open the center. I know everyone is very much looking at the good work that's coming from here. And Oscar, mashallah, Brother Oscar, he's been inviting us to come here for many years. Since I think it opened a year ago, right? A little over a year ago, since it opened, but we finally found the opportunity to work together. Fawaki Institute was founded about 7 years ago, and the primary goal is to unify the community around the Quran and Quranic education. And this is a great example that when we look at our classes that we have now in 10 different states, we have 50 classes going on every week in Arabic and Quranic Arabic, some classes in tafsir, some classes in other sciences like tajweed that focus around understanding and giving us a grounding in Quran that brings together the entire community. It brings together people from different backgrounds. So if you look at our classes in the DC area, you see people who are Indonesian background, you see people who are Turkish background, people who are new Muslims, American white converts, African American converts. We see people who have been Arab for generations. We see others who are from Indonesia, India, Pakistan. So you see the entire spectrum of the Muslim community, and the one thing that unifies them, that brings them together, is the Quran and is the language. When I was studying in Syria, that everyone was speaking to each other in classical Fusha Arabic, because that was a lingua franca. That was what unified the community, allowed us to connect with each other, as well as connect to the Quran and connect ourselves to the tradition and the learning we've heard. One of the things that the Arabic language does for us is it transforms the way. It gives us a lens. Does anyone know who Imam Suhaib Webb is? So Imam Suhaib is a teacher. He says that learning Arabic is like it's like watching TV in high definition with color versus watching it in low definition in black and white. So you're watching the same thing, but you give a lens in which you can see it much clearer, and you can see it with a lot more excitement. So that's what we want to do with the Arabic language for all of us. Every person who has a love of the Quran, love of learning the language directly, is to connect to the Quran in its original language. So the reason we did this program was we take a small surah like Surah Asr, and it can be looked at in a very simple, basic way, or we can have a very deep understanding of Surah Asr that will help us look at it in a different way and transform our understanding. So we have my brother actually, Saad Umar. He will be presenting to us how we can look at the surah and also then Islam and the Quran in an entire different way with the Arabic language as a tool to do that. Inshallah. We also have Brother Amari, if you can raise your hand, that he is here as part of the Fawaki team, that if people in this group after today, because we can do a lot of talks, and mashallah, everyone gets inspired, everyone gets excited, but if we can today have a plan of action after we leave today of how we're going to improve between now and Ramadan and then for the rest of our lives, then it becomes something that can change us. It can transform us. It's not just something that we listen to and we forget. It's something that can transform our lives and the lives of our families and our children and the entire society around us. So after we're done with the enriching speech, we're also going to talk about what are next steps that everyone can take and what resources Fawaqih can offer to help you get there. Because one of our goals in Fawaqih is, that's why we're in so many different locations, is that wherever there's a need for setting up classes and learning of Quranic Arabic, and not just classes but also communities of learning so that people can learn it together, and so they form a community not just around food, not just around ethnicity, not just around a common cause or attack on Islam, but around the very core of Islam, which is the understanding of revelation, understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's message, and through that transforming our lives. If we form community, we help us form communities around that. So inshallah, if anyone is interested in being part of that community or bring that community to your area, wherever you live, and whichever associations you're with, then we can also talk about that, inshallah. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Saad. Saad came here all the way from Pennsylvania. He was actually traveling, he was speaking in Florida, but because of this program, he came back and he came straight down here from Pennsylvania. He spent less than a day at home to be with us. He's been giving this talk this weekend to over 350 people. So you're part of that group. It's been at 8 locations across the DC area. So this is our, I think our 5th location. And inshallah there'll be 2 more tomorrow. So he, in addition to doing studies at Georgetown in literature, he is a songwriter. He writes poetry. He's reviving that art of the power of the word. We always say the pen is more powerful than the sword. My name's Saif is the sword, right? He's trying to perfect the pen. So you'll see why that's more powerful than the physical sword. We see so much fighting. We see so much bloodshed, but we will realize how the power of the word can overcome even all those troubles that we face. He also spent some time in Turkey. In fact, he's going to a trip in Turkey. He's taking some scholars, some amazing scholars next month, to a trip to Turkey so that the Muslim community can, and I know some of the families here, some of them are also going, that they can transform their view of the beauty of Islam and learn and educate while they're in these places. So if you're interested in those types of programs, you can speak to him. And he also ran the Poetic Vision Tour, which is a tour across the country, one of the most popular tours that brought the Islamic messages through song and poetry to people across the country. He's done a lot of other things. He right now is establishing a living community in Allentown, Pennsylvania. You can actually go visit it, in which 70 people have moved together. They're living, so they're not just talking about Islam, they're actually living Islam. They're creating brotherhood and sisterhood, and they're learning together, and they're doing good work together. So he's establishing that community that we can all go visit, inshallah, or even move there if you're interested in Allentown. So I'll let Saad take the stage. Inshallah, he'll share some of his ideas about how we can renew the way we look at the same surahs we read every day.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nasta'hidihi wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. And when we hear the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's name, we all say this dua that our dear brother he recited the same dua before. It's very important that we hear this dua before we hear any talk on Islam, any khutbah, any khatira like today. Because it begins with Innal Hamdulillah. It begins with a reminder of why we're here. We're not here for me. We're not here for either of these organizations. These are beautiful organizations, but we're not here for organizations. We're not even here to hear a speech. That's not why we came. We're here for Allah. That's the only reason we're here. And if I'm here giving this speech and it's not for Allah, then we might as well turn off the microphone. And if these organizations are not for Allah, then we might as well take down these banners. And if this building is not for Allah, then we might as well sell the building. So, Inna alhamdulillah is a reminder of why we even listen to these speeches. Because sometimes we can listen to speech after speech after speech, and our hearts don't change. Sometimes it can become more about the speaker than what they are saying. After years of going to programs, many of us have felt this way. We will be given a list of lectures and speakers, and we want to go because a certain person is speaking. And we hear the speech, and it's more about the stage and the person speaking than what they're speaking about. So we will go to a conference, and we all love Brother Nouman Ali Khan. We all love Imam Zayd Shakir. We all love Brother Omar Salaman. We love Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. So we look at the topics, and we don't look at the topics. We circle the names of our favorite speakers, and we go. And we forget why we are going. Right? Am I right or wrong? Yes? So, in alhamdulillah is a reminder that whatever you are about to hear, the praise does not go to here or to here, or to here. The praise goes to Allah. That's the first thing. There's a second reason. If you still can stand up so everyone can see. There's a second reason that we say in this dua, مَن يَهْدِ اللَّهُ فَلَا مُضِلَّ لَهُ وَمَن يُضْلِلْ فَلَا هَادِيَ لَهُ. There's a second reason that when we make this dua, we make it before we hear a speech. One time we were at a Muslim conference. How many people know Sheikh Hamza Yusuf? Have you heard of him? Many of you. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf was speaking. This is in the early 2000s, and I had the blessing of being there. As Sheikh Hamza Yusuf was speaking, it's good seeing a familiar face. As Sheikh Hamza Yusuf was speaking, he was making this dua. Inna alhamdulillah nahmadu. And the crowd was talking. They're playing with their phones. And then he stopped. He ended the dua, and he started speaking in English. And everyone was like, shh. He stopped the speech. And he said to the audience, what I just recited is more important than the speech I am about to give. That the dua that I recited is the point of us being here. My speech are just some afterthoughts that I'm going to add. And he mentioned this portion of the dua. مَن يَهْدِ اللَّهُ فَلَا مُضِلَّ لَهُ وَمَن يُضْلِلْ فَلَا هَادِيَ لَهُ. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to guide someone, a gift, we don't earn it. Even if we're here, we're not earning it. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to guide someone, they will not be misguided. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows someone to be misguided, when he's talking about guidance, it's مَن يَهْدِ اللَّهُ. When it's talking about misguidance, it's وَمَن يُضْلِلْ. It's actually not attributing it to Allah. It's not saying Allah misguides. Yudlil means they are misguided. It's adab. It's manners. If someone happens to be misguided because of their own choices, there is no guidance except with Allah. Why do we remember this before we hear a speech? You tell me. Why are we reminded of this dua before we hear another speech?
So you know what you're going to say.
You know what you're going to say? What else?
You know why you are here.
You know why you're here, but we are also reminding ourselves where guidance is coming from in the first place. That there are people, please. Because of Allah. Because there are people. Let's not forget Abu Jahl. Let's not forget a man who heard about this deen from the Prophet ﷺ directly. He heard the Quran, not from a CD, not from an imam, from the Prophet it was revealed to, alayhi salam. He heard, he heard, he heard. It did not change him. How are we going to be different than Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab? Are we going to hear speech after speech and remain the same? Because if we are, then how is this speech any different than the speeches we've already heard? How is this speech? How is this speech any? I got it. Bismillah. If we're going to hear another speech and our hearts will not change, then perhaps the problem is not that we're hearing or not hearing. The problem is our hearts are not ready yet. Umar radiallahu anhu had heard the Quran before the day he became Muslim. But that day, the Quran did not change. Did the Quran change? His heart had changed. How? When the day he went to kill the Prophet ﷺ, he had his sword ready. And then he found out that his own sister had become Muslim. And he went to her house, we know the story, he hit his sister. When he saw the blood on her face, and he saw the tears in her eyes, it's like when a river, like the Nile River, it floods and it makes the land fertile. The reason people used to live by the river is when it floods, it makes the land fertile so you can put a seed and the seed will grow. When Umar radiallahu anhu saw his sister crying and saw the blood on her face, those tears and that blood made his heart soft. And the surah he heard from was Surah Taha. And that's the story of Prophet Musa. What a miracle, because the Prophet ﷺ would say years later that Abu Bakr is like Ibrahim alayhi salam, and that Umar is like Musa. He read the story of the Prophet that he was most like. And you know when Musa alayhi salam took his staff and he threw it in the Red Sea and it split? When the Quran went in his heart, it split him like the Red Sea. The Surah Taha, the story of Musa alayhi salam, was literally the staff. It went into his heart, and his heart split from ignorance into truth. And when the water came back together in his heart, he was a believer. When the staff went into the heart, he was not a believer. What changed? His heart changed. What do we say? This is all before we hear the speech. Because we don't just need to keep hearing speech after speech. You know, many of us know more Quran than the companions. Many of the companions. How do I say this? Hamza radiallahu anhu died when? In the battle of Uhud. Exactly. And by the time of the battle of Uhud, much of the Quran had not been revealed yet. Do we realize that? Any of the companions who died in Makkah, they did not know about Surah Baqarah before they died. On the Day of Judgment, if you say, oh, did you read Surah Kahf on Fridays? They will say, what's Surah Kahf? If you say to them, these companions, did you know, it's crazy that we can't drink alcohol. They'll say, wait, you can't drink alcohol? By the time they had died, alcohol was still allowed. So when it comes to the facts of Islam, many of us have heard things that the companions had not heard before they died. Unless you died after the Prophet ﷺ, you did not hear the whole Quran. Because it was still being revealed. So it's not necessarily information that we lack. Our hearts are not always ready. Inshallah, our hearts are ready today. One last reminder. In Surah Fatiha, we recite, Ihdina. Everyone, Ihdina. So in Surah Fatiha, we say, guide us to a straight path. Many of the scholars say that the response is right after Surah Fatiha, in Surah Baqarah. Right after. You don't have to wait 3 ayahs. You have to wait, it's in the 3rd ayah. Okay, so we say, Ihdina Sirat Mustaqim, and the rest of the surah is which path? The path of those you're happy with, not the ones you're unhappy with. Okay, right after that, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif Lam Mim. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Right there in the first ayah. After Alif Lam Mim. You ask for guidance. Many of the scholars say that that verse and the entire Quran after that is a response to Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim. We said guide us to a straight path. Here is the book that makes things clear. Hudan lil muttaqin. It is guidance. You wanted guidance? It is guidance for people of taqwa, not people who read the Quran. There are people in university that study the Quran every day and they're not guided. Not for people who hear the Quran. Abu Lahab heard the Quran from the Prophet ﷺ. For people who their hearts have taqwa. So are we ready to receive? Yes or no? Make the intention. Are we ready that we hear something and our life will change? Because nothing I'm saying is from me. I am not so important. You all have to do something for your life to change. I can just repeat something that I heard from my teacher who heard it all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. The real work in this talk, people think, oh, it's hard being a speaker. It's not hard being a speaker. It's hard being a receiver. Anyone can talk. Are we receiving? Am I receiving? So we make the intention today to receive. People will come and say the speech was good. The speech was not good. That's okay. No one ever says our receiving was good. Our receiving wasn't good. But that's where everything is. In how we receive. Are we together? We have to be on the same heart. Are we on the same heart? Say yes if you believe it. Yes. Okay, inshallah. So today we're going to talk about Surah Asr. Imam Shafi'i. People from Indonesia know Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i, one of the greatest scholars of our deen. And our Indonesian brothers and sisters know Imam Shafi'i. He said about Surah Asr, if this was to be the only surah revealed in the Quran, it would have been enough for the believers. Why? If we look at Surah Asr, the first lesson is, it's not about quantity, it's about time. But it's not about quantity exactly, but it's not about how big something is, it's about the value of it, the quality. Surah Asr is very short, yet very powerful. It's very short, but very powerful. We begin from the very beginning. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What I would like to say is, there has never been a time in our ummah where the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ agreed that we don't need Arabic, we need translation. This is the bid'ah. We have agreed that it's okay for us to live our entire life without ever understanding the Quran in Arabic. Understanding the Sunnah, the Hadith in Arabic. Right now, we would say, if I said to Egyptians, are they Arabs or non-Arabs? Egyptians.
Non-Arabs.
They were originally non-Arabs. They learned Arabic, so now we call them Arabs. Syrians, Arabs. These are people who learned Arabic later. When did that stop? When translations came around. Now we have, mashallah, we have translation in every language, yes? Yes. When translations came around, many scholars said that we should not do this. They even said it was haram to translate the Quran. And people said, why? They said that if we change the Quran, not change, but if we translate it to different languages, in the beginning it'll be good for new Muslims. That's why they did it. They said new Muslims will help them. They said that over time, people will forget Arabic and just keep the translation. What happened? They were right. When the French came into Africa, and they colonized all of these countries, you know what they did? They built Quran schools. What? I thought they destroyed everything. They did. They built Quran schools, but they said, we will build you a Quran school. One condition. Teach in French, not in Arabic. So what happened over time? The words of the Quran were preserved, but the meaning was changed. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they were afraid that the words of the Quran would be lost because it hadn't been compiled.
So when those 40 people who had memorized the Quran, fought, when they died in battle, Umar radiallahu anhu came to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Abu Bakr was the Khalifa. He said to him, we have to compile the Quran. Because people are dying and the words are going to be lost. Now, the words are being preserved in our iPhones, in our computers, in our mushaf, in our books. The meaning is being lost in our hearts. Because we lost the language. We'll start off with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We translate Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim as, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Problem with that is, if you study English literature or English grammar, that is not even a full sentence. The younger people, who's in high school here, raise your hand. If I said, not even done yet. See? If I said, in the house, the most tall, the most beautiful, is that a complete sentence? What is that called in English? A sentence fragment. How have we taken the most important verse of the Quran and translated it as a sentence fragment? In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. It's not even a complete thought. There's no verb. The reason for that, this is the beauty of learning Arabic. Before Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, there's something in Arabic which you call a hidden verb. There's like a blank space. Then Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And the reason there's a blank space is every time we say Bismillah, we have to fill it in with what's on our mind, what's in our heart. So if we're talking, we say in our minds, I'm speaking Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That makes it a full thought. By having that blank space, we are personalizing the Bismillah. We're making it different every time we say it. So we are actually never repeating Bismillah in our entire life. Do we see that? Now it gets very interesting. Every step gets more and more deep. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. Some people say it means the most gracious, most merciful. But what's the difference? These are just words. Ar-Rahman, many scholars say, refers to the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has on this earth, but for everyone. People can spend all night disobeying Allah. And in the morning, the sun will still come up for them. It's not that the people who, we've had moments like that. We've done a sin at night. When we wake up, does the sun come up? Why? That sun is like a sign from Allah, I'm giving you light again. Even though you gave me darkness. You gave me darkness, I will give you light, so you remember who you truly are. You're given hope. Again, that's from Rahmah. Even if we disobey Allah, Allah gives us. If a farmer sins against Allah, Allah will still give him rain for his farm. That's Rahmah. If it wasn't for Ar-Rahman, the people who lied against Allah, before the breath came out of their lungs, they would choke. So that's the mercy in this world. It's for everyone, and it ends with the Day of Judgment, Ar-Rahman. That's what many scholars say. And it comes first in Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, right? It comes first, because it comes first in this world. But listen to this. Ar-Rahim is the mercy that goes from the Day of Judgment into Jannah. It's like a breeze of Rahim into Jannah. Like even with the way we recite it, we see the meaning. Why? In Tajweed, who knows what Rahman is? Who's studying Tajweed? Is mud what? What kind of mud? Anyone know? It's called mud tabi'i. The normal mud. 2 counts. And it's shorter. Even the way we recite it, it shows that it's for this world. Because it goes, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rahim goes into Jannah and it's longer. Even when you recite it, it goes all the way to 6 counts. And it ends with the sukoon. Rahim. Sukoon represents infinity. So when you hear it, you can hear the mercy echoing into Jannah forever. Just in the way that Tajweed is. It's not even the words, it's the way we recite it. Hear it again. Tell me if you can hear Rahman being shorter for this world, and now when you hear Rahim, you hear it going as a breeze into Jannah. Listen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Do we see it now? One last thing, then we'll move on. Bismillah. So the ba is what we say in the name of, right? With the permission of. Ba. Bismi, the ism, is the name. Ism. What's your name? Ism. The alif, when we write Bismillah, the alif is gone. And you connect the ba to the sin. Right? Bismi, the alif is gone. It disappears. Some of the scholars say that just in the way you write it. First I said just in the way you pronounce it is meaning. Just the way you write it, the way you take the ba and you take it to the sin, it shows that when we connect to Allah, there won't even be an alif between us. We will connect directly to the name of Allah. There's not even a barrier. The alif disappears and we connect, and Allah is closer to us than our veins. Bismi, directly to the scene. Does that make sense? Now we start with Surah Asr, Wal Asr. When the waw in Wal Asr is the waw of Asr, swearing. It's like when we say Wallahi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by time. Now, this is very interesting. Anybody have a pen? Oh yeah, it's better not to throw it because of this example. It would be very awkward if you had thrown it to me. Good, mashallah. So this pen, one of our teachers, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he was in Africa, in Mauritania, and they were studying in a class. This was in Abu Dhabi. They were studying in a class, and one of the students asked for a pen. And thank you for not throwing it. The one student threw the pen to the other, like this. They kept writing, and the teacher stopped. Because why? We said guidance will not come until we're ready. He realized that him telling him things won't do anything because they weren't ready yet. He stopped the class. He asked for the pen. This time they didn't throw it, they gave it to him. And he put the pen in the air like this. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swore by this pen in the Quran. Allah, the one who created the universe, the Quran, which has been in the knowledge of Allah for eternity. This pen has been mentioned by Allah for all time. Not even a billion years, eternity. The Quran has been in the knowledge of Allah for eternity. And you're going to take something that Allah mentions. We're lucky we are able to touch something that Allah has spoken about. Imagine if Obama mentioned someone and you meet him, like, you're the guy Obama mentioned? Allah mentioned this. And we are lucky enough to even touch it. And we're going to throw it at each other? So this was a reminder that when Allah mentions something in the Quran, it makes it very important. Now, of all of the creation that Allah mentions in the Quran, there are scholars that say, outside of the prophets and the angels and the Quran itself, the greatest thing that Allah has created is time. Why? Because time will kill everything else. We'll take, was that what you were going to say, sister? Is our equity. Yes. It's our equity for Jannah, it's equity for the hereafter. And the scholars say that time is the thing that will take everything else out of existence. And it will still remain. No matter how strong you are, time will take you out. You will die. They say in Surah Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us, كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. All that is will be gone and Allah will remain, right? But right before that happens, something else will happen. All of creation will be gone, yes. All of creation will have died, except the angel of death. Except the angel of death. And the angel of death will look to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and think that he has been spared. Because he's the angel of death. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will order that he die. And then the day of judgment, and everyone will be resurrected. After the day of judgment, the people who are going to heaven will come out. And by the way, when the angel of death is killed, there will be a silence. and only Allah will remain, as He was before He created anyone, as He has been for eternity. Our souls are eternal this way, one way. We were created, now we're eternal. Allah is eternal in both directions. And He will be alone again as He was. Then we will come back, and the people of heaven will come out. And the people of hell will come out. Heaven and hell. They will line up. And in the hadith, we are told that a black ox, like a bull, a black ox will come out. And the people will be told that that black ox represents death. That's death itself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will order that that black ox be slaughtered. At that moment, death will die. What will happen? Death will be killed. And when death is killed, time will go on forever. The people in Jannah will cheer, and the people in hell will scream. Because for the people in Jannah, they will never taste death again. For the people in hell, all they pray for is death. Please let us die. That's when time will go on forever. Do we understand how great time is? For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to understand this, because sometimes when it comes, most of us have 6 or 7 surahs that we always recite in prayer, right? They're short. And we recite them without thinking. We're missing everything. Time. Listen. Why is time so great? For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not within time. We have to, it's hard because Allah is infinite and we're finite, we're limited. So it's hard for our minds, we're not supposed to truly understand this. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very simply, it's not simple, I'll say simple. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is not 2016. In this very moment, the Roman Empire is falling, 6th century. In this very moment, the Prophet ﷺ is making his hijrah, 7th century. In this very moment, Adam is being created. The first man is going to space. In this very moment, all of those things are happening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not more in this moment than in all moments. He's beyond our idea of time, because time is His creation. Time is His creation. We can't even, I won't go too much into this, but we can't even say He's before time, because before is within time. We can't even use it. If somebody says, is it true that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we're going to do before we do it? To say before we do it means you think Allah is within our time. It's not before for Him. If our entire life is like a movie He's already watching over and over again, how can you say before we do it? That means He's in 2016? Does He know what we're going to do in 2017 before we do? That means He's within time. Our questions make us realize that we don't understand what it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created time. Another example of how great time is. And Allah's creation is time. How many hours do we have in our day? 24. We wish we had more, but we have 24. How many days do we have in our year? 365. Why do we have 24 hours in a day? Because the time it takes for the earth to spin all the way around. Why do we have 365 days in a year? The time it takes the earth to go around the sun. Good. Galileo would be proud. Okay. Now, there are planets in our universe. The way we have 365 days in a year, they have 4 years in one day. Why? Because they spin very slowly, and they're very close to their sun, their star, and they go around very quickly. So they will go around their star 4 times before they spin all the way around. So the way we have 360, we spin 365 times before we go around the sun, they'll spin 1/4, and they'll be all the way around. So it'll take them 4 years to spin all the way, so they have 4 years in one day. And this is just in the created universe. How great is Allah? And we are so confident we understand anything. We travel 3 hours, we're in another time zone, we don't even know how it works, we keep missing our prayers. Allah is a master of time. In quantum physics, if you've seen the movie Interstellar, space and time are relative. If you have two twins, identical twins, same age, same exact age, one is on Earth, one goes in a spaceship 100 times the speed of light, and they come back together after 10 years, what will happen? Will they be the same age or will they be older? One will be older. Because of quantum physics, their age will be different because age is connected to speed. They will have aged differently. One will be much older than the other. This is how amazing the time is. So when we say that the Prophet ﷺ made the Isra and Mi'raj, the Isra to Jerusalem, the Mi'raj to heaven, that animal, that heavenly beast, Barak, we know that he could go many times the speed of light. According to quantum physics, he could have made that journey and come back in a single second. Because he was going so many times the speed of light. Even according to our science, that makes sense. Allah is the master of time. The problem is though, sometimes we don't realize how powerful time is. And we say things like this, oh, I'm just killing time. We're not killing time. Time is absolutely killing us. When a baby is born, what do we recite in the ear of the baby? Adhan, and some say iqama also. Right? Why do we recite adhan? The adhan is for prayer, salah. The baby is not going to pray for many years, correct? Why are we reciting the adhan? They say that that adhan is for that child's janazah, funeral prayer. And that's why for the janazah, the funeral prayer, there isn't an adhan. Because the adhan was already recited. For every one of us, our funeral prayer has already been called. The iqamah for our prayer has already been called. Our entire life is the time between the iqamah and standing up for praying. And the thing is, it's not even us standing up for praying. By the time our prayer will come, our janazah, other people will be standing up for us. So there are people in this room that will be at our janazah. Look around the room. There are people in this room that will be praying for us in our janazah, in this room right now. And they've already been called to that prayer. They just have to respond. That's our time that we have. You understand? The janazah has already been called. And now, this is the time we have before people will stand up. And by the time people answer, we won't even be there. They'll be praying for us. This is time. Wal asr. And the people of our deen that understood this, they would be, one of them was asked, they said, oh, can I ask you something? He said, if you can stop the sun, then yes. Meaning I have no time. Imam al-Jawzi was the greatest scholar when it came to writing books. If you're interested in this topic, you can look up a book called Value of Time by Sheikh Abdul Fattah. Value of Time is story after story that we learned from one of our teachers, Sheikh Tawfiq, about time. Sheikh Jawzi wrote 700 volumes on the deen. 700 volumes. He wrote more than anyone else. They said that if he had written 50 pages from the day he was born, he couldn't have written as many books as he did. When Imam al-Jawzi was on his deathbed, he's laying on his deathbed, his students come up to him and they say, Ya Imam. And remember, in his time, he was the greatest scholar in the world. The whole world, he was the #1 scholar. They came to him and said, Imam al-Jawzi, is there anything from your entire life? What is it from your life that you regret? What regrets do you have? He lived such an incredible life that this was his response. He said, I have only one regret from my life. Now, who could even say that? If someone asked me, any of us, what regrets do you have in your life? You would have to take out your phone and start listing things from every day. Where do you want me to start? May 12th, I have 40 regrets. So far today, I actually have 20 regrets. I'm actually regretting how long my intention for asking this question is wrong. Your intention wrong. I regret this moment. I regret what I'm thinking about in this second. He said, I have one regret from my life and the way he used his time. What was his regret? He said, I regret the time I spent eating. Eating. Now somebody would say, maybe he spent his whole day eating. No. His students wrote in the book about the way he would eat. He would only eat rough bread. Why did he only eat rough bread? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he never had refined flour in his life. In his life. He never had bread that was soft. So he would only eat tough bread. And he would dip it in water and then eat it so he wouldn't have to waste time chewing. And that was his regret for the time he had spent. It's like Abu Dharr al-Ghifari radiallahu anhu, the great companion, when the Muslims conquered Persia. And suddenly, the Muslims had food that they never had before. One of the things they had now was rice. First time, Muslims never had rice. The Prophet ﷺ never saw rice in his life. And this was plain rice. This was rice like if you make it and you put nothing in it. No salt, no pepper, no gravy, no meat, nothing. Plain. MashaAllah, Indonesians, Pakistanis, we know rice. Right? He took the rice plain. If you make rice for your husband or the husband makes it for the wife, and you have plain rice, what will you do? You forgot to put anything on it. You get angry. He did the same thing. He put it in his mouth and he spit it out. But for the opposite reason. Plain rice. What kind of food was he eating that he had this reaction to plain rice? He took it in his mouth, he spit it out. The companion said, what are you doing? He says, Wallahi, this is so delicious that I'm afraid that Allah is giving me my Jannah in this world. I won't eat rice. These are people who understood this world. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins with wal asr. The wow is the wow of swearing. It catches our attention. Then he mentions time. We just talked about time. But the exact word he uses for time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every word he uses is perfect. And you cannot take another word that means similar thing and replace it. He didn't say was zaman, was sa'a. These are words for time. He said wal asr. Asr doesn't just mean time. Asr comes from the root asara. Arabic words come from roots. They give extra meaning to it. Asara means to squeeze. Anybody know the Arabic word for juice? One of the words, asir, exactly. Why? Because you take a fruit and you squeeze it to get juice. So asr is specifically the meaning of the time that squeezes us. Why does time squeeze us? What happens when you squeeze something? You give it pressure, stress. Exactly, sister. So our life is being squeezed by time. If we have a boss or maybe a teacher, and the teacher says, or the boss says, I'm going to give you this assignment, and there's no deadline. That'd be Eid. Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Would there be any stress in our life if we had no deadline? No. Time is what squeezes us. But there's another meaning. Now you have to stay with me. This is a little difficult. Stay with me for this. If I were to take this mic and I squeeze it from two sides, it'll create pressure. Asr. What asr, right? The two sides that squeeze us are the future and the past. We are never in the present because we're always being squeezed for the future and the past. Think about this. If everyone can do something for me, put your hand up. Everyone has to. I know some people are really cool and they don't want to. If you're older than me, you don't have to, but the young one, two hands up, mashallah. We take our hand. I want you to take 3 seconds in the future, as if it's ahead of you. Just grab it. Now bring it, now 2 seconds, bring it closer. When it gets to you, it's now present. Now, put it behind you, it's in the past. Now we're going to go a little farther to get 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1 second in the past. Look. As soon as I say the word now, by the time you hear it, that word is already in the past. It's like time is like a river and it's going through us and we can't hold on to it. If I say, I'm very happy right now, you'd say, well, what about now? We're not in now anymore. Now is in the past. So you have to say, I am happy now, and I'm ready, I'm happy then, and then is gone. This is time. But another thing for us to think about, this idea of time squeezing us. Listen to this carefully. I'm sitting here in this chair, and you're sitting there over there. I want you to think about something that stresses you out. Now everyone's going to stop smiling. So, think about something that stresses you out. Does that have anything to do with what's happening right now? Or does it deal with the future or past? It's either the future or the past, for sure, correct? So none of our pressure and stress has to do with now. One of the du'as that we make is for Allah to protect us from grief and anxiety. Anxiety has to do with the future. Grief has to do with the past. So in actuality, that dua, we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the thoughts of the future and the thoughts of the past so that we can finally be in the moment. So when Zen Buddhists talk about being present, that's what Surah Asr is telling us. The squeezing of time is because we forget about now, because we live for a past that is gone. And if we have tawakkul on Allah, we can ask for forgiveness and move on. And we worry about a future that is not promised. It may never happen. And we don't realize that our future is just a string of presents, and our past are those present moments that have gone before us. But we're never here. Right now, there are people in this room that are not here. They're thinking about what they're going to do next. The next may not happen. This is happening now. And the now I just said is in the past. Wal asr, by the squeezing of time. And if we can be in the present, you know what happens? The squeezing of time like this becomes like this. It doesn't have to squeeze us anymore. That's what you call in Arabic inshirah. Alam nashrah laka sadrak. That the squeezing asr of time will be released. And that's barakah. Allah will give us blessings. Every hour will become 10 hours. Because it will not squeeze us, it will open up for us. I'll give a quick example of this. 2 stories. Is anybody here 6 years old? My niece, come on. She was actually, this happens to work. The person in the story was exactly 6 years old. Sense? This is my niece. Okay, so can you do a little play with me, skit? Okay, let's stand there, that's all you do. A 6-year-old girl came to the Prophet ﷺ. We're just going to show it, obviously. She's not the girl, I'm not the Prophet. They say in the story that she grabbed onto the Prophet's finger by his small finger, pinky, like this. And the companions were in the middle of a very important discussion. Imagine there's like Sheikh Hamza or Imam Brother Nomali Khan, and someone just takes it in the middle of a speech and just walks away with him. Everyone's like, come on. So she took him by the finger and she started walking through Medina. Walking. And they're walking, and they said, the companions said, a sa'a path, like an hour. Like sa'a means a long time. And she keeps walking. And the Prophet ﷺ is going with her because she wants to show him something. And he goes from one street to another in circles. And the companions are like, a long time passes, and then she looks up at him, she smiles, she runs away, you know. And the Prophet ﷺ realizes that she had nothing to show him. She wanted to spend some time with him. So she had grabbed his finger and was just walking. The Prophet ﷺ was so in the moment that he knew as a prophet who has this great responsibility. His job was to be there with that girl, nothing else. Another story, there was a woman in Medina, she had an issue. Her issue was, when she talked, she had a little bit of problem. We would say with a problem in her mind, that she would just talk without thinking, and she would just keep repeating things and saying things. And sometimes she would annoy the companions. So the Prophet ﷺ would teach them a lesson. He would teach them. She came to him one time, she was sitting, and she wanted to sit with the Prophet. And the Prophet ﷺ sat down. Nowadays, especially a woman, if a woman wants to talk to a scholar, there's constant stress. They'll say, yes, yes, what can I do for you, sister? And the sister's like, I have something to ask you, a personal question. And then there's some man, an organizer, like, brother, we have to go to the next session. And the sister's like, and he's like, yeah, tell me what you need to ask. So I had this problem with my husband. And he's like, yes, yes. And the brother's like, we have another session. There's constant stress because that organizer is thinking about the future. And he doesn't realize that that scholar has no job except being there with that person. There is no program. There's no 2,000 people waiting that are more important because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given her that person, and what we keep doing is abasa wa tawalla. We keep turning away from the person who needs us for someone else. It's not okay. The Prophet ﷺ sat down with that woman. And she wasn't even asking things that people would say make sense. She was just talking and talking and talking, and just listening and listening and listening. Finally, the companions started to get impatient. I mean, we wouldn't have given her that much time. We would just pulled her away and taken him somewhere else. They waited, finally they're like, what is she doing? She's wasting the Prophet's time. And he keeps listening and smiling and listening and listening. She finally stops talking. Once again, it was like an hour had passed. And she finished, and the Prophet ﷺ made sure she was done. She had nothing else she wanted to say. Then he looked at her, and he asked her another question that was open, that she would keep talking more. He looked at her and he said, well, what do you think about this? And she said, she started talking again. Then the companions understood. There was nothing for a prophet, the last prophet, the greatest man ever created. There was nothing more important than to hear her as much as she wanted to be heard. There was nothing he could have done or said at that moment that was more important than that woman. He knew how to be present. We have forgotten how to be present. We will never feel the presence of Allah. Listen, eyes here, please. We will never feel the presence of Allah if we cannot be present in the moment. Because it's in that moment that we would feel Allah. We will not feel the presence of Allah if we live in the future and the past, and we're not. When we're praying, we're thinking about the future or the past, We have to become present. We have to become still, so then we can start to move. When our body becomes still, our heart begins to move. When we're always moving, our heart becomes still. We have to learn. The believer is like the eye of a tornado. The tornado goes like this around them, and they're calm in the middle. Calm. Calm. There's nothing that can shake us up. This world cannot shake away the believer, because you know how a boat is anchored in the water? Right? The believer is anchored in the stars. So nothing can shake them from course. The winds can blow. You know a baby has an umbilical cord? Our umbilical cord is with Allah. Raham, the womb. Rahman, Lord. The umbilical cord is with Allah directly. We are still in the moment. Wal asr, the squeezing of time. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Now, how much of that meaning is in the translation? By time. This is where we lose the meaning of the Quran. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. We would translate that as, all mankind is in loss. That translation is in loss. And we're going to see why. Inna means tawqeed in Arabic, which you'll learn it either Fawaki or Bayana, any of these Arabic programs will teach you this. Inna means emphasis. What is coming next is very important. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Now, insan could mean all mankind. Al-insan is like all of mankind, but it's so interesting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't use the word nas, which means all, qul a'udhu bin nas, all mankind. He uses insan, which actually means one person. It means what? One person. Some of the scholars have said that one of the reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word insan is that it shows us that when we're in loss, when we're away from Allah, we are going to feel lonely. The reason we feel lonely, when we say we're alone, Lonely, you can't be lonely if you're not alone. You don't feel alone. You can be in a big group and feel lonely, but you feel alone, right? How can a believer feel lonely if they cannot feel alone